We believe that collaborative conversations will lead to better outcomes in the world of mental health. Welcome to the Lift and Make Lighter podcast.
Welcome to the Lift and Make Lighter podcast. I'm Tom Telford here with my wife,
That's so exciting.
Liza Telford, LMFT, in our home. So fun to sit together and to be able to talk. LÉVO is the sponsor of the podcast, obviously, and you run and started a practice called Us Therapy Group. So between you're running a practice and a therapist and me helping grow LÉVO, we are all in on mental health. How did we get here? How did we get here? Give us some background because I'm going to blame you for the blessing of being all in on mental health. So welcome and give us some background.
First of all, thank you. I've always wanted to say thanks for having me on the podcast in my living room. That's super fun.
It is fun.
It is. I don't know that we've ever sat this formal on our own couches.
In blazers.
So let's talk about the dream of sitting in blazers together first.
Okay.
Because that feels really important to this conversation. As for taking the blame, that feels personal.
I have said on other podcasts, to be transparent, that when I look back on the last 25 years of my career and my profession, the majority of the great doors that opened have come through you. Whether it was Northwestern Mutual that you were working at, when we were 21 years old, or some of the other doors that have opened since then, a lot of the greatest things that have happened in our lives have come through you. And that's a great thing. And I view today our lives all in on mental health with Us Therapy Group and LÉVO and even Brainstoke. I really view them as doors that open because of your big heart and passion for lifting other people. So
that's very sweet of you to say.
It's true.
I have heard people will say friends, family, like, oh, I heard about you on the podcast. Or I heard something that Tom said that you've said, and I'm like, well, maybe. It could have come out that way, but he tends to polish things up a bit. And they sound a lot better coming from you. So thanks for giving me the credit, but we also know that hard work is a team effort, and I think we're a good team, honestly.
We are a good team.
And I think we have, through our own experiences and through the hard things that we've gone through, I mean, it's the cliche of that which does not kill you makes you stronger. It kind of feels like sometimes
we
took a really hard path and, didn't need to make it as hard on ourselves as we did, but that's how we've learned. And so that is fun to think through, is just kind of reflecting and looking back. That's fun.
The hardest things in our lives that kind of, if we were to say that our identity and what we were doing and what we went through in our teen years, maybe childhood years, and the challenges of growing up and young adulthood, young marrieds, we went through a lot of stuff. We've been through a lot together, and we chose to lean into each other instead of leaning out. We never viewed our differences or some of the hard things as things that justified or that would have pulled us away from each other, saying maybe something like, well, we're just not compatible. We knew that there was something
we might have thought at a time or two.
I think we fought our own selves to try to determine and make sense of situations and say, well, maybe we're just not compatible. Yeah. And I want to circle back to that maybe in a minute. But it has been a commitment to working through hard things together as opposed to drawing away and going our, different directions and figuring things out. We tended to just lean into each other overall, that there was a commitment to each other. And I think that has afforded us to be where we are today, one. Two, I think that it has afforded you to sit with couples now as a therapist who loves couples therapy or marriage counseling, and to have the lens and, the context to say, this couple is going through this stuff and I can get there with them. It's not foreign to me because I too have sat in some pretty tough stuff, in my own marriage. So anyway, it's just kind of fun to dive in together and to just kind of share openly and vulnerably about what's been really hard for us in our own individual lives, what we brought to a marriage, and how we've kind of, grown since then. But take us all the way back, because you were you before me, and you had a childhood and teen years and early adult years, and that really framed who you became and what that brought to our marriage. So do you want to go back?
Sure.
Share a little?
Trying to think how far back is important to this particular conversation.
Teddy bears, bow ties, and Michael Jackson.
Wow, that's too far back.
Childhood. At least hit on how you today would look back as yourself as a child in the middle of 7 children in 11 years.
Yeah. I was kind of talking over you when you said that, but wearing this blazer does make my child heart happy to think that I find myself in a career where if I wanted to, I could wear a blazer every day. I feel very, very comfortable and happy in a blazer.
Why the blazer?
And I don't know. I think for some reason it's just this classic look for me that says I mean business. And you will often say, like, are you playing business or are you actually working in business? And sometimes I feel like I'm playing business, and that's okay, if only in wardrobe. But as far as going way back, I think being a therapist now, I have said to people as they have asked me to mentor them, or outside of clinical work, like how do you become a therapist? And I have always said the best therapists I know have done a lot of their own work, and they understand their own story, and they understand how their mental health affects their work, and how they came to balance it or not balance it, or how they have worked through their own stuff. And being real with themselves will help them be that way with other people and authentic. And so I'm actually glad for this opportunity, because even though I feel like I'm there as a clinician, I have never had at least a recording of that story for me, because that doesn't come out in sessions very often. But I think the most important markers of my story was that I am the middle of a large Utah family, grew up LDS, and being in the middle of a lot of siblings that were born close together. My parents had 7 children in 11 years, and you know that story. And it was an amazing childhood. I feel like looking back, can say I felt very secure and safe and loved and cared for in my family. And it was chaotic and it was crazy, as it would have been. And you knew me in high school, and it was near unto coming into a beehive. And I will compare like sitting in our living room as to like just go stick your head in a beehive. And there will just be a lot of commotion and a lot of things happening and moving parts. And my parents did an amazing job with that. And they were fortunate to have the means to care for that big of a family well. Yeah. And so I am really grateful for that. So every kid has their little quirks and their things that make them unique, but I would do these little tendencies when I was a kid that if I didn't do them a certain way, in my head, I would have these thoughts enter that something else completely unrelated would happen. Like, for example, I would touch the corner of a picture. My parents had this big stairway that went upstairs, and they had all these pictures, and I had to touch the bottom left corner on my way up to my room as quick, like even if I was late and there was a carpool waiting outside, I'd run up the stairs and get to my room, get my thing, whatever I needed, and then run back down. Weirdly, didn't have to touch them on the way down, just had to touch them on the way up. So didn't really interrupt my life. My siblings would tease me about it. My brothers would, I'm sure my sisters would too. I don't remember that part, but I remember even when I was crying or somebody had teased me, I'd cry up the stairs and be like, and still touch every picture. And it sounds so funny when I think about it now as to what was actually happening, but it was soothing. It was me doing some sort of ritual that would soothe my mind and settle. And so I did several of those little things, whether it was numbers on a clock or I don't remember eating certain ways, but like a lot of kids will describe not having their food be able to touch. But it wasn't that they didn't like the flavors touching. It was that something else unrelated would happen if they touched. That's the difference. Is touching the pictures wasn't about the pictures or about me. It was like something bad wouldn't happen if I did those things. And so,
Interesting.
But I didn't ever connect it as a kid because it didn't interrupt anything.
So it wasn't about straightening them.
No, it was.
It wasn't
in a
that they were
family
off.
That's
it was
that
just
big and chaotic. Like, and I tease my mom about this, and it's probably somewhat offensive, but and I love her dearly, and so I would never want to be offensive. But I don't remember getting my way. Like, I didn't get to be super particular. It wasn't like, but I was like internally super particular. But I don't remember like, just give Liza her way and everything will be fine. But, this is my podcast. If they want to go on a podcast and say, that was totally how it was, they may have a different story as we all reflect on.
I can see 7 follow-up episodes between siblings and mom.
No, they were great. But my memory of it is I would get teased for doing the little things, but it didn't keep me from sleeping or doing well in school or not going to activities or keeping me out of things. It was just these quirky little things. Fast forward, I choose to serve a mission. And almost from the day that I received a mission call, I felt very anxious about it. I just felt like I did not feel good about the decision I had made. But I had said I was going to go. I had told everybody. I followed through up to that point in my life with other things that I'd done. And so it just didn't occur to me that I had a choice to be like, make a decision and then change my mind. And that felt embarrassing and scary to me. Yeah. And so I went. And I went down to the MTC, the Missionary Training Center in Provo. And to make a long story short, almost immediately felt just debilitating anxiety, but I didn't have a word for it. And so the ruminating thoughts of just the quirkiness of like, if I do this thing, if I memorize this many scriptures quickly in an hour or something, then my parents won't die at home. Or I would there would just be these ruminating thoughts that I won't go into all of them, but that I was doing something that would keep me from being able to serve a mission that had to do with like being worthy to be there. So I would just be haunted by thoughts of I've already done something that would keep me from keeping the rules, or I was going to do something. I was going to like take my teacher in front of the classroom and like start swearing at him. Like, can you imagine how terrifying that would be? Or like hit somebody, or that I would just do these behaviors that would, and I never did them, but this crippling fear and ruminating that I was just going to kind of freak out. And I didn't know what it was. I've since come to know that it was anxiety, and my anxiety manifested itself through obsessive compulsive disorder, specifically scrupulosity, which is basically a religious OCD. And you've
Or a
talked
moral
about
OCD.
it. Yeah, it's like a moral, if this, then God will be mad at you. Or
If I
you
say
have
these
this
words, if I
thought.
do these acts, cussing, swearing, sex, whatever that is, like
impure thoughts or impure actions or something. And what I have come to now know, which I wouldn't have known then, was OCD is really a neurological thing that your mind is ruminating on the most, what you would consider the most inappropriate or most fearful thing that you could come up with. And so for a missionary who is supposed to be doing things in this, according to these rules and this moral compass, and studying and learning these teachings of, this particular way, it was really disruptive to think of being completely opposite of that behavior. Why wasn't I in the MTC going, what if I just wake up in the middle of the night and stab my companion or kill? Why would I not be worried about killing someone?
Yeah.
There's just no rhyme or reason to it except for the worst case scenario you can think of. And for me, at the time, not feeling worthy to be doing what I was doing was the worst thing I could think about. And so I didn't tell anyone. It made me so anxious, and I was so scared that I was going crazy, and I'd have never had an experience like this. And so I finally ended up talking to the leader, which was called the branch president at the time. And so he suggested I go and speak with the counselor. And it was this, I now use this one experience when I am working with somebody, and because of the years and the wisdom and understanding and learning I have gained, sometimes it's hard for me to get back to that most anxious state in my mind of trying to remind myself of how it felt to be that scared and that unsure of what's happening in your own mind. And I think of this one experience with this counselor, and it takes me back to that place. And I have a few like journal entries where I can say, okay,
I remember.
I can get that. I can get to that feeling. And my friends, and this story, and my family knows this story, and it's this hilarious conversation that I can see as just hilarious now. I would love to find this counselor. I have no idea his name. I have no idea where, if he'd worked there 2 days or 20 years at the Missionary Training Center, but I went in and I explained to him kind of what was happening, and I'd never said it out loud to anyone. And he described to me OCD, and I remember thinking, he thinks I'm crazy, and I need to prove to him I am not crazy. Like I'm normal. And I looked him in the eye, and I said, he started describing OCD, and I said, oh no, I was the drill team president in high school. Now, mind you, at this time, I'm 21. So I would have been the drill team president 4 years before this. So I'm not sure why I thought that was like the pinnacle of my normalness was 4 years before that. I was 16, 17.
Yeah.
I have no idea why I thought
But you were trying to justify or kind of prove like I'm capable.
Yes, that's
like,
all
I was a student. I was a leader on my drill team at a big high school in Utah. Like I can do stuff.
Yeah, and all I thought he would say was like, oh, well, of course. Yes, that explains everything. Head back to your dorm. Good sister. And why don't you just head on back to class? All will be well.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that you were the drill team president. And so now I know that, and that's going to be fine. I don't know, but I was shaking and crying, and I was having this physical reaction to like, no, I don't know what you're saying, but I'm not that. And the more I came to, and with the whole series of, I ended up coming home. He said this would not be a good state of being to go and serve. And so they really, this has evolved so much for missionaries now, where they just give them more information. They have more information before they leave and after, but I'd had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, this was 1997.
98, beginning of
97,
98.
yeah, okay.
So it's not that, obviously he knew what OCD was. I
Yeah.
had just never said it out loud, what I was experiencing, so I didn't know what that means.
Yeah, there was no protocol then of mental health preparation pre-mission. No, the world was not talking about mental health all the time.
No.
There was no social media, TikTok,
No.
there was none of that. And so, it was new to be going through that.
I think it was not new to missionaries,
Well,
but
sorry.
it was definitely
yeah.
new. I
New-
mean, obviously
new to
he
you.
knew. This counselor
Yeah.
knew. So it was coming up enough in his office and I came to find out much more about it once I came home. But essentially what happened, and obviously being 21, I was already well into my college years by the time I went. And so I was far down a path of my major, but almost instantly when I came home and started into the mental health work of finding a counselor and trying to get some resources and understand what was happening for me, I knew I wanted to be somehow to be able to have the skills and the abilities to help myself. And then it took a few years for me to think I want to do this for work, for my own work. But that was kind of the genesis of that. Is I came home and I'm not going to lie, I saw some quirky therapists that I
Yeah.
did not say,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this feels very relatable.
Yeah.
And so when I came to have an understanding of what really happened there, I have come to understand it as episodic OCD, where I might have had tendencies as a child, but they weren't being manifest in a full episode until my brain was in a place of like a rock in a hard place, where I was like, you don't want to be here, and you can't say you don't want to be here. And so for me, and what I will tell clients often is, I wish anxiety next to it in the dictionary said a lack of options. I wish it said anxiety, a lack of options, because anxiety is your brain narrowing to there's no other choice but this what if that's in front of me. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
What if this happens? This is so scary. And so it narrows and narrows, and
Because at that point, it's interesting. I mean, later, it was interesting for me to learn about it, which we don't need to dive into necessarily how I started to learn and uncover it. But it was surprising to me to hear about what was going on, because you had been to school, you lived away from home. It wasn't like, oh, this is the first time she left on a mission.
Lived out of the country.
You were away at school. You were at BYU Israel for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So you were away from a lot of your comforts and what we now call coping mechanisms, which I want you to talk about. But so what specifically, when you say the lack of options were, was it, I'm at the MTC, these are the rules, it's very strict, there's not a lot of leeway. Is that what it was? The narrowing of, this is how I have to behave?
It was the narrowing of that. It was a lack of understanding that the thoughts I was having were just thoughts. They weren't facts. And when working with anxiety, that is day one of learning the art of your thoughts are just thoughts.
Yeah.
They are not facts. And so when you start to treat your thoughts as facts, then they feel more real, more true. And I had no understanding of that. Any thought that came in was like, it wasn't, what if I did? It was like, it's only a matter of time until you do.
This thought
and
will
this will come
happen.
into fruition, and this is going to happen. I am going to stand up at some point and scream the F word at my teacher, and which was so funny.
Yeah.
But in the MTC, when you're sitting with a bunch of kids reading scriptures, my mind was like, I'm going to do that. Like, that's going to happen. And it wasn't bringing me joy. Like, I'm so mad. I'm just going to stand up and scream at people. I was like paralyzed that something I would do or say something inappropriate or unworthy of my stature, and I had no way of deciphering. This is just a thought.
So when you say ruminating, that the description of ruminating would be what you're describing. This is an extreme thought that I can't let go. It just keeps looping back, and you obsess on the thought.
A ruminating thought is just like, I don't know how I'll explain it to the youth if they've never seen a record player. That's what I always say, but it's when you used to have a record player and the needle would stay and zip, zip, and just go around and around, and it would skip. And that's essentially what ruminating thoughts are, is it's the same thought in a loop, and it just increases in intensity, and you can't disrupt it, or you don't feel like you have the power to disrupt it, and so it gets stronger.
Yeah.
And it gets more concrete. So that became a work of mine for myself, not knowing I would go into the field. But I really attribute post-mission feeling better to coming home and being in my own comforts, to be able to settle my mind and to be in my own space. And instead of staying in what I felt was the pressure cooker of being this certain way, to be able to be in my own bed, get my own understanding and bearings, and use the S's, really. But I didn't know I was using them.
Yeah.
But I started working out and getting sunshine, being with family, like touch, and being excited for things. And I got back in school, and I really I got on medication to help settle the chemicals in my mind. And that is something that I will say frequently, I don't feel like it has to be a life sentence for medication or for whatever tool you're being introduced to. Try it for a season and see if it helps regulate you. And then you're able to use the tools that you learn in therapy to do that more organically, create the chemicals on your own. And ideally, that's what helps you to come off of something, or your body doesn't produce that. And so you need it. But I did for a time, and I was really grateful for it and for that resource. So what ended up happening was I got back in school, and then you and I started dating, and I attribute all the time that feeling good and falling in love and getting the oxytocin of connection going with you did more for my mental health than, I think of it as like a yes and. That there was clinical help, and then there was environmental help, and there was just social help. And so those three things combined, my parents learned a lot and were really helpful and helped me get the resources I needed there. And then you and I were dating, and that was super fun. And we got engaged and got married. And so I really feel like that contributed a huge in part. Fast forward to the next hiccup of stressor, which I felt like I got so far, but then I don't even know if we want to tell that story, but
we do. But before you dive into that next phase, I just want to comment on what you just described. I've never thought about it this way, but hearing you describe the story, now we have a lens for this, and we can put language to it. What you just described was, I was on medication, I was in therapy getting help, my family, I started to date, right? The social. We now know that the gold standard of mental health care is the biopsychosocial model.
Yep.
And so the bio meaning the body, the medication calmed down some of the just high, ruminating thoughts, and so that was the bio, and medication helped with.
And it helps. It really does help settle the amount of cortisol and adrenaline that you're continuously, I call it getting a chemical shower. You're continually exposed to that.
Fight or
if you
flight
can
response.
Help settle that so that your brain can actually take a hard look at, oh, I do treat my thoughts as facts.
Yeah.
Oh, but if you feel like you're on fire all the time, it's really hard to challenge distortions, and it's really hard to do the work you need to when you feel like your brain is on fire.
Yeah, so going to therapy without the medication for the short term was harder to just focus on the behavioral things you were learning in therapy because your mind was just on fire. It felt like on fire. So the combination of the bio and the psycho, the help and support chemically, along with therapy, that was the bio, and the psycho, and then the social of just friends and dating and being around, other people and support systems. When you are a missionary, a lot of those biopsychosocial things are taken away. Some of those same coping mechanisms are gone. Now missionaries can work out every day.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a missionary, it was like, if you worked out, you were vain because you were focused on getting fit or buff, and you should focus, on others. And, now missionaries call home once a week, right? They have all of these additional biopsychosocial things available to them that we now can put language to. And as an LDS culture, wow, what a difference that's made. It doesn't make it perfect, but it's helped.
It's made a huge difference. I wasn't even given an opportunity to look at those factors before or during.
Yeah.
It wasn't even, so I think we've come a long way from that. And I'm so grateful for it. I have since talked to, several dozen people where their child is in the same position suffering, or they themselves are trying to make understanding or make meaning of their mission experience, and my story resonates with them, and it sounds very familiar, and it's so helpful to put the language to it.
Yeah.
So
I'm really grateful that I was like your medicine.
let it all come back. Let it soak in.
Liza loved those oxytocin doses from me.
It's true.
We've joked, but that was a time frame that you being vulnerable and in that state that you were, and not me coming home, and I feel like you were my oxytocin pre-mission and I was post, and it was binding to us, in a way of just helping each other. So we obviously start dating.
And I don't know why you didn't have the cultural context to be as understanding as you were. You were very young and driven and ridiculously capable to who I felt I was at that time. I felt very broken. And I'm sorry about my voice, but I have this scratchy voice right now, but I felt very broken at that time, and I'd never had that sensation. I'd felt very capable growing up, and I felt very secure, and we all teenagers have insecurities, but it didn't feel like it ruled my life. And then when we started dating, it felt like it was, I was all the things, like you were way out of my league, and I was not my confident self that you knew before you had left. And so for
there
whatever
very much
reason,
was a role reversal, it felt like.
Yeah.
I mean, you were extremely capable, which is what I was attracted to. I knew that you were an achiever and driven and had it together and outgoing, and coming home and seeing you differently. I didn't perceive you as broken, but I perceived you as someone who was in a humble state of really trying to figure out now what. who am I now? You know, if I've come home early from an LDS mission with so much pressure, you said you were going to go, you know, you did, you came home. I just felt like I saw you in a state of humility and trying to, again, to just, what is my identity now, right? And how important it is in those years of like, how am I known and who am I? If I didn't finish this thing, how do I then resume? And I think we now see that all the time, right? Of just young kids who go on a mission and they don't finish the way that they thought or intended. And they're really grappling with something bigger than just, I didn't finish an LDS mission. Because I think the church and culturally, you know, people are starting to be much more understanding and can talk about it. But that doesn't mean that the individual, just because they didn't finish a mission, knows who they are.
No.
So go into the next phase of that, of trying to just address, who am I now?
Well, that's a good question. As far as the next phase for me, doing my own work became really important. And there was always this kind of rain cloud of, okay, so do you finish stuff or not? And so then I became like, I've got to finish school. Even though I had this idea, I wanted to go into psychology at the time or something to do with it. I was so far down in my degree that I just finished my business degree at the U. We were married, and we decided that we would start our family then. And so before that happened, before our first child was born, you may remember we got broken into, which is a
I do
whole,
remember.
yeah. Should we look at the camera? That is, that's a whole nother story for another podcast. However, I felt like we were going along doing great. And that, I would say, that break-in caused a disruption and another episode to occur for me. And what was so interesting is because I was not in the missionary space, and because I was married and like being given permission to have sex in my mind, that there were these markers that I was like, okay, well, I can visually see I'm not doing anything that I considered like incorrect at that time.
You were on plan. You are now worthy in God's eyes to like.
Which I just cringe at now, to feel that I felt that kind of pressure and on myself and for anyone experiencing that. But that no longer seemed like the worst case scenario anymore. And so it completely switched to safety, or that something scary would happen to someone I loved again, or that I was going to harm them, or so then it became a safety thing. And that scared me so bad because I thought it was kind of resolved. And so, and it was definitely not the same dip that it had been the first time.
Yeah.
I knew a lot more by then. The cycle was much shorter. But at that point, I met who became a great mentor therapist up at the University of Utah. And he really changed the way I think about therapy. And at the time, I had no idea. Now, being a therapist, I'm like, oh, that was totally an intervention. He would have me teach him things all the time about our culture or my understanding of something. And he would just kind of play dumb, like he didn't know. And he knew a lot more than he let on.
Yeah.
But he was just monumental and helpful, and he was an amazing clinician, and his story is amazing. But it was after that that I could see myself, and he seemed very normal to me. And he also came from an entirely different background than me. He was Jewish, and he was from New York and had decided to retire with his wife in Utah. And so he just had this totally different story. And I hadn't related to somebody so deeply, so different than my world. And so he opened up this world to me of like, maybe we don't have all the answers. Maybe it's okay to maybe think, well, that's a thought instead of a fact. And he just allowed me the space to consider that I was death gripping some of my thoughts and values as that they were these facts that I had to live by or bad things would happen. And so he was just a huge influence in my life. And I haven't had this, honestly, since doing work with him, I never had another episode to that severity because it was hard work for sure. And you lived through it, but it was done in the safety of somebody that knew what they were doing and allowed me the space to challenge my own thoughts and decide where I want to go. And so that became the kind of the end of that story. And I made a promise after I finished my work with him that someday I would be able to look other people in the eye and say, it's going to be okay. You won't feel like this forever. You've got some work to do, but this is a thing that a lot of people deal with. And if you'll do the work and that you'll get the tools, then you can live a very happy, fulfilling, normal life. And it didn't feel possible to me at the time. But that became kind of this mantra for me, is I would have given just about anything at that really anxious time in my life to be able to feel like I was understood. And so that's the place where us therapy and going back to school and creating my own business became a passion project. I just wanted to give people the space to look at somebody that, not saying I'm the most normal, because I'm definitely still quirky and I do wear blazers and sometimes lobster sweaters and weird things that my family was making fun of. But
the array of therapy sweaters and smocks and
there's some
just
smocks,
like there's a lot.
There's just so much that goes
The
with
wardrobe of a therapist is
it.
pretty
My
awesome.
inner fifth grader that wore a bow tie to the first day of school.
It's true.
She's very happy.
I think that it has something to do with like comfort food or comfort blazers.
Comfort blazers.
How do
and
I
bow
protect
ties.
myself? How do I like put something on me that helps me, feel comfortable? But so
funny.
I want to just frame this for you. One of our favorite books, Conversations Worth Having. So one of the things that's quoted in there is, "We live in worlds our conversations create." So I'm curious
Very
now
profound.
on this end, what were the conversations that created your world growing up? And what was therapeutic about a Jewish man who was in his 60s, if not 70, that wasn't, quote, from your traditional world of upbringing? And how did it change your world? Like in the 3 inches between your ears world, right? So what are the conversations that were happening in the household or in your mind or in your culture growing up? And how did the conversation change that world from, a therapist that is entirely not part of your world? I mean, he was not an LDS therapist. He was not, a priest, a leader, or a bishop. He was someone entirely outside of that typical world that conversations had created. So have you thought about that? Just what shifted?
I actually don't know the answer to that, because I had professors who I'd gone to schools that were not I didn't go to BYU until later.
Yeah.
And so I'd had influences that I really liked that were outside of my cultural context, but the conversations I had with him, I think first and foremost, which I think is the sweet spot of therapy, is an unjudgmental space. Because when you have a conversation with a friend will try to validate your experience, or a parent may try to parent your experience or give you direction, which isn't, neither of those are bad things, but in a therapy setting, the idea is to challenge your curiosity and just make it safe enough for your brain to just float. And he was really good at that, at just like, so what if, and I could, what if you did kill someone? Or what if you did swear at, break up with, fail at, do something? Instead of saying, oh, you would never, or that's not even like you. He just let me sit with thoughts that were absolutely terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And would make me have a physical reaction to them. And I would live through it. And essentially, the most well-known therapy for OCD is exposure therapy. Exposing yourself and your body to the sensations that are creating the anxiety. And when you work in a perfect world of getting it just right, or people pleasing, you have made an art of getting it right. And so you soothe yourself that way, instead of challenging and putting yourself in the position to not get it right.
Yeah.
Or to be, fail and or go through the breakup, or fail the test, or disappoint someone, or all the things, and just sitting with it became, I think, more therapeutic for me in his space.
What's interesting about that is when you describe sitting with a therapist and having a professional kind of challenge your thought, not to change what you believe, but to get you to challenge the way that you cope with your own thought.
Yeah.
And that it's different in this context. We tend to think, well, that, like, how could that work? Or, you know, how safe could that be for someone your age, for someone else to kind of challenge you to do that? And it's been helpful for me over the years to kind of put it in the context of like sports psychology. You know, when a professional basketball player has like this mental block about shooting foul shots in the NBA finals, they may have a sports psychologist recreate the pressure, the feeling. You know, it's game 7 and the game is on the line and you have to take the free throw. And that's exposure therapy in a sports environment.
Yep.
What a therapist is doing in OCD or anxiety is they're trying to create a similar environment where they're saying it's not sports, but it's thought. And your performance is, how am I going to sit with the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions as if it were? Mm-hmm. And to be able to challenge that. And as the spouse, it's been helpful for me to kind of watch and to just see, what was it that shifted in Liza those years ago, how she addresses thought? You know, and even though I didn't know exactly what you were doing and how you were doing it, I started to watch an evolution as the spouse, that you could in fact challenge, this was just a thought, it's not a fact.
Well, you have been a witness to it for 26 years now, of me saying the most crazy things, because that is the way through. Whenever someone says to me, like, how have you learned to just treat it as a thought? I'll say it out loud. Tom's heard the craziest things, like just the craziest things that don't even faze me now, because I won't allow them to be more than a thought.
But you learning that, you know, at 21, 22, bringing it into our marriage, I believe it's become our secret sauce in a way of being happily married 26 years later, because we can now say the crazy things out loud. We can say things like, hey, instead of us fighting or threatening divorce in our marriage, let's just really talk about it. And, well, what would actually happen if you said, I'm done today? And we would talk it through. And what does that really look like if we take that thought all to the end? Well, how would we split up assets?
Ugh.
Who would our kids go live with?
It's really more that we're just lazy. It's more an issue of, it sounds exhausting if you start to really talk through not only marriage, but just the thought. I have a funny thing I will say. I don't want to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I have a funny thing I will say if it's a particularly dark thought of, oh gosh, I just don't look good in French braids or in prison orange. And so that's just not something I can do today. And that can sound so dark to somebody. But for me, it takes it to this place of like, I just don't look good in French braids. So let's just decide not to kill someone today, because it's really inconvenient.
We have neighbors who joke with us about the way that we speak about parenting, that, well, if we give them back, we're both going to prison. And by give them back, meaning give your kids back to God. Like, there's only one way to give them back to God. And it doesn't end well with prison time.
It sounds kind of dark and morbid, but if you can allow yourself to be like, that's a thought. Yeah. And I don't have to feel hijacked by my thoughts. And that's really, it works across the board with anxiety, with depression,
it
with
does.
OCD.
And you learned it as an individual, but you brought it into marriage, and it's helped us, the way that we communicate and go about the sacred cows in a relationship or a marriage, where a lot of people, if they're afraid their spouse is going to cheat on them, they would never say it out loud because they're scared to say it, because saying it out loud may make it real or more real. Or
what I see a lot is you be really passive aggressive about it. Like, who are you talking to?
Yeah, nothing may have even happened, but you're holding them accountable as if it did.
Yeah.
So just the ability to openly communicate. Years later, I went to therapy because I wanted to be able to say some things out loud about my own life and childhood and things. And I've often, we often will hear in this space, of the mental health space, why talk about your problems? Like, if you talk about your problems so much, that's all you're going to have is problems. And I actually believe in positive psychology, and what you say out loud over and over, you're going to manifest it into your life. So I'm not saying that I don't believe that that is true. If you just obsess over a problem and don't take action to address it. But some people would say going to therapy is just going to talk about your problems. And I just believe it's one of the biggest lies out there, because being the spouse 20-something years later and going to therapy, that was the most productive time. I now know why professional athletes all have a psychologist, which is really the therapy, right? How can a conversation change the trajectory of a life? And yet, conversation is, right? It becomes the relationships that we have. It becomes the interactions with people, running companies. The conversation is the organization. You can never run a company and not dialogue with the people and your clients in it. Like, conversation is incredibly powerful if it is productive conversation. And so
and it brings things into light in a way. If you are in a safe space in therapy, then it's bringing things into light that even if you just say them out loud, you start to hear, oh, I don't really feel that way, or I do, and that's scary. And you have a space to sort through it, versus a friend or a parent or a coworker, that there's some consequence that goes to those kind of conversations. I happen to be married to somebody who could tolerate me saying scary things, not all the time, but when I still stand by the, I don't know why you were as open to some of the things I was saying that you were, instead of just being like, well, that was okay. That is terrifying to leave you.
There were scary moments.
For sure.
There were moments when our oldest, Jackson, was a baby, and you would tell me certain things that, thoughts that came to your mind, and I was like, you don't say. And yet,
where are we headed today?
I could see in myself the bravery that you were willing to say it out loud. Yeah. And we both know you were saying things out loud at 21, 22, 23 years old about what was really going on in your mind. It took me until 40 to start saying most of my stuff out loud.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why until you're in that rock and a hard place, and this is what I will always say to people when they say, when do I know I need to see a therapist, or how do I know it's bad enough? And my response is always, how life interrupting is this? And in your 40s, it became pretty life interrupting for you as far as just daily feelings and functioning. And for me, that happened at 21. And I feel fortunate that it happened young, because it's given me this long runway of life to continue gaining. But whenever that happens for you, I truly believe it happens for most people. At some point it will feel, not that for most people will have to go to therapy, but there will be a big enough disruption for everyone to feel, wow, I am not handling this well. I am not where I want to be or how I want to feel. And this has gone on long enough.
Yeah. For someone who naturally, my personality is, I can go to ride a bike for 8 hours by myself.
Yes.
I can go in the mountains and talk to trees.
And you do.
I cannot talk for hours. So that's not naturally me, but I was surprised at how therapeutic, how good it felt to go and to just be able to express stressors and how I felt to another individual. My therapist his name's Jake Holbrook, big beard. When you see him, you're like, was he the lead singer of ZZ Top? Right? He's a man's man. Like,
you would really
so
love
to
that.
sit with him and to have the dialogue, I have to admit, it was just cool and empowering because of the stressors of being the dad, the provider, the business owner. Just, it was helpful to be able to do that. And so I'm advocating, for being a dude speak guy, and the benefits of that in my life. And I now recognize why business executives and athletes, why having someone to just talk to and to get into their mind so that they can just make sense of it on their own is so valuable. A good friend of ours, Trevor Farnes, who's the founder and, was the CEO of Mountain Ops. I've heard him often say to people, you are most well-positioned to serve the person you once were. In other words, all that you've gone through, he was talking about being almost bankrupt, having no money for food. He had a wife and children. They were destitute financially, and what it took to get through that. And now the guy runs a company that's literally fed millions of people throughout the world. Mm-hmm. He was suffering, and now he has the ability to relieve suffering. Mm-hmm. You and I now find ourselves in a position where the mental health space is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's hard. It's a hard industry. It's a hard business. I think you feel similar, but we've had the blessing of having some mental suffering in our own lives that has now positioned us to serve, other people in a uniquely way where we've earned the compassion to be able to sit with some others, you more than me clinically. But can you speak to that a little bit of just what it's like to have the opportunity to sit with other people who are in that space you have been in 20 something years ago? Comes back, we have our moments still, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, I will often have, in the course of a week, someone say to me, "Oh my word, that must be so heavy and so hard. How do you do that? How do you sit with people and listen to their problems or to their marriage?" And I honestly feel that empathy. I feel like it's a privilege that when somebody is suffering, it isn't my job to do that work for them, but to, even if it's loan them hope, to give a space for them to see that they can do it themselves, and that there are tools and that there are ways of thinking about something that they can do and become how they want to be and who they want to be. I find it a privilege. And when I meet with a couple and I know that we have been in hard places before, and I can sit with them and say, and it isn't about me or my marriage at that time, but I will say, you have choices to make, and you have a space to do it here where you can. And I will say that one of the hardest conversations you and I ever had, is that we came to the conclusion that we knew we could live apart, that we could do our lives individually. And as scary as it was to say that out loud, it was, I know I will be okay. And Tom knows he will be okay. We choose to be here. We choose to be in this marriage, in this relationship. And it has quite literally made the biggest difference, I feel like, was that conversation of like, we are not going to stop having hard things happen, but we are making a daily choice to be in this.
Yeah.
Not because we have to be, not because we were told to be. And I feel like giving people the space to have that conversation as a couple or in individual work, to say, I am not my OCD. My OCD is a thing that I have, like diabetes or anxiety. And to what degree I suffer with it is my choice. That is a choice. I really feel strongly about the Buddhist tenet that life is suffering, and the second tenet being the second suffering is my choice of how do I handle the first suffering.
Yeah.
Because life is suffering. There are hard things that are going to happen. I find that being able to sit with people while they figure that out is a privilege more than a burden or mine to solve. That it's a privilege.
I feel that too, and I don't have the same opportunities to sit with people that you do, but it is a privilege to be able to help other people in the ways that we can. We were at our niece's wedding recently, and I was asked to speak, and they're rock climbers. Mm-hmm. And, the message that I shared was, you fell in love, now you have to climb, right? And I think that that's a metaphor for so many people who have a mental health challenge, is they've fallen down and they now have to choose. They have to choose to climb back up and to get up. Anything else you would say about that, the work itself? When people often go to therapy, they may think, well, what is talking about it and what is sitting on a couch? Like, how can you really get better from feeling so bad by just talking?
Yeah.
So what is it when you think about the work of therapy and now what you're doing in Us Therapy Group with individuals and families and couples? What is the work? What's the hard work of therapy?
Yeah. It's so different for each person, but I will say, come and see. Because it is hard to picture how something is helpful if you haven't tried it. It's like when our kids were little and I had a friend who was a pediatrician, say, give them one polite bite.
Yeah.
Like try one bite of the eggs and see what you think about it. See if it's helpful. See if you like them.
Yeah.
Then you can say, I hate eggs. Or, try the vegetable. Just try it one time. And I will always say, try it 2 times, because I think it's really hard in 1 hour to give your life story and get any traction. But it can happen. And what does sharing your story look like? And what does even saying something out loud about, I don't even know why I'm here, I just know I don't feel good. Even being able to say something out loud that you probably don't say in your regular life, or somebody's encouraging you, try it. See what happens. See what happens when you have an objective view of something that is outside of your own sphere of influence and your own story and narration and your family story or your friends. I say things often to clients that if I said to my children, they would say their made-up word of don't therapize. Don't therapize me. And I will say, I wouldn't say that to clients, because you're more directive in your own life, and I'm more invested in your life and in my life and our children's lives. But when I'm working with a client, it is their space to be directive and to see what's working and what's not. And it can be through humor, and it can be through resources and modalities and learning and growing. But until you try it, it won't make any sense to you as to why it could be helpful.
Yeah, even hearing you describe that, one of the things that helped me, a reoccurring theme in my own life is, you said it when we were married, one of the things that you were attracted to most was my drive. Mm-hmm. Well, my drive has served me.
That very same trait has gotten us in a lot of
trouble. Right? And so, and it has. There's been a lot of moments in my episodic moments of life where my drive has exhausted me, where I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and Epstein-Barr, and doctors are like, you have to stop being an entrepreneur. You got to get out of this. So in therapy, challenging, if I'm not driven, if I'm not Tom the entrepreneur, startup, buy, build, sell, do, start, if I'm not that, then who am I? Well, if it's exhausting me, and it's in every 7 to 10 years I break down in physical health, that's not really serving me. So then how am I going to stay that identity and yet cope with the stressors of it better? Right? And a lot of people ask us personally, where did BrainStoke come from? And what are the 5 S's? And even though that really came about the last few years, but it's been in the back of my mind for years and years of, I'm not going to stop being an entrepreneur. And you can't just take drive out of me and just say, be lazy. I can't do it. It's literally who I am. But how I cope with being a driver can change. That is my choice.
Yep.
I was challenged to try to do it different in therapy. And the answer is, I wake up and meditate differently. I think about stress differently. Most importantly, I can have a positive self-dialogue in my head and say, I'm just going to give myself a pass today. Mm-hmm. I'm just too tired today to ride 80 miles and call 50 new people. Right? And what I recognize is that the challenging in therapy of my identity and how I deal with the thoughts, that was all the difference. I was constantly trying to shoot perfect foul shots all the time. Yeah. And what I recognized was I was stressing myself out over perfection to this identity, and I needed to give myself a better pass of just thinking about it and talking through the thoughts in my head. They didn't start in my head, though. I couldn't do it in my head until I had practiced it with a therapist. Like, yeah, you can. Like, Tom figured out, like, you can talk differently to yourself. that was the power of challenging how I dealt, right? And so it wasn't like sitting on a couch and light conversation. It was being challenged. But if you're not this person, then who are you? I'm no one. That's how everybody knows me, is that guy who does these things. Well, if you're not going to change that, then what can you change? Well, I can change how I think about it. I can change how I stress about it, you know? So that was incredibly productive, the challenge of just self and the thought of self. Now, when you think about owning a practice and you doing that, you know, I was not your client. Although I
feel
have
like we need to note that.
Although I have been,
I was not the therapist, and I think you
no
said
one
Jake's
gets
name.
the same access.
Yeah, nobody
with their therapist that we have had to each other. But now, what you know, in building Us Therapy Group and coaching and mentoring other providers, how has that, your lens of your own therapy, building, and now mentoring, how does that give you the ability to help them now build their practices within Us Therapy Group?
I don't know that I can answer that. How does that? But I think of the mentors I've had, and my mindset goes to a pay it forward.
Yeah.
We have been fortunate to have good mentors, and you have this awesome thing called the mentor tree that you talk about, of the people that built you. And I feel the same on a different trajectory, that I had really good mentors in Dr. Loeffler first in this field, and then with Debbie Gilmore and Carson Kinney and John Howard, and our time at Aspire and owning and learning and growing there. And I just feel like I had and continue to have, I see them as mentors still, of people that have learned through their own hard work and mistakes made and successes had, and that it was a great opportunity for me to try that out on my own. And I have a totally different respect for you. I mean, I've lived next and with you as you have built companies for close to 30 years now. And I remember it wasn't your most sensitive moment, but I was up way too early, just ruminating about the business or something. And I came out and you were already out here on the couch, and you said, "Welcome to entrepreneurship." And I think I might have flipped you off. I don't know. I'm not sure that that it was our best moment, but it was of like,
it's heavy.
When your eyeballs open,
yeah,
you are thinking about something growing, and how to make it better, how to help people and processes and things. I felt like I had been in the business of growing children and helping our family grow.
Yeah.
And in the last, 8 years, it has been a much more single-focused passion project that has turned into a business now and career that I love. And it is interesting that in grad school I studied systems, and that this is just a system.
Yeah.
That I'm trying to create the healthiest version of a system. And when I work with families and couples, I think that is the work, when you can understand what are the strengths and challenges within this system, and how do I celebrate the strengths and keep them strong, and work with the challenges and not see them as failures, but just how do we get better at what we're already doing well, and how do we help challenges become strengths. And couples do it, families do it, system, schools do it, businesses do it. And so
is it easier to make changes at Us Therapy Group than it is at home?
Slightly, because when you're the boss, you get to, have kind of the final say. And I can't think of the last time I got the final say around here. So
Not true.
That's
Not
pretty
true. There's thank goodness for restaurants, right? Just
my word. Maybe that's what we should talk about, is what has changed from me from me being the stay-at-home wife to and mom to
Yeah.
you being the house spouse. I feel like that's a whole nother episode.
For sure, our home cooked meals and laundry game has gone down significantly.
What has not gone down is that I think, an appreciation for the roles that we have for each other. I highly encourage couples to do a role reversal at some point in their marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, be mutual respect for each other's roles, and what we've done the last number of years has been,
Why don't you tell?
that's been a positive.
Yeah, I think you should tell the listeners about the first time you created a job chart for our kids.
Yeah, I
frustration.
was super zealously excited about this job chart, and
We were this close,
it was gonna
folks, to a whistle around his neck.
it was gonna hold everybody accountable, and everyone was gonna be stoked to do chores on time and on the day, and yeah,
And how long did that last?
it was a giant lead balloon, and the job chart probably still sits on our old house wall and was never implemented, nor...
No, it's just 2
Yeah,
weeks.
no.
Every new system works for about 2 weeks. And I think I might have mentioned that.
Yeah.
And you were like, not this one. This one's going. And we have to learn. And I say things to
Yeah.
you like, why do I have to have liability insurance for a cracked sidewalk or whatever? And you just look at me and go, you're so cute.
So if for our listeners, if you're toying with children or start a company, what's going to be harder? Yeah. Job charts and kids,
Yeah, well,
significantly.
I think it's
You
been
can't pay them to listen and adapt.
not so much.
Oh.
But do you feel like that's been a monumental shift for us? Is having an appreciation for, I feel like it has been.
Yeah, no doubt. I just think
Appreciation for the others.
I recognized how for 20 years you had run a household, and run a household seems like a very shallow thing. I mean, it's not, but
You run a household.
But it's one thing to just make food and make laundry, like take care of the house, but it was the management of the social relationships and school, and to be an engaged house spouse. We joke about that term, but to be an engaged parent who is running your family's lives at a high level, it is tough. It's incredibly challenging and demanding, and there isn't an off moment. And
You don't say.
yeah, no,
You don't say.
for sure. So there was an awakening of just an appreciation for years and years, especially when I was traveling for about 12 years so often, of just how much was going on. And
vice versa, right? Remember how many times I would say to you, man, I wish I was just sleeping in a hotel room by myself and choosing what I was going to eat and not smelling like peanut butter. I can't imagine the burdens you carry.
my favorite was after about a month of your business ownership, where on a Friday, I'm like, so what do you want to do this weekend? And you're just like, I
Watch
just kind of
paint
feel
dry.
like sitting around. And I'm like, you don't want to go out and be social and like see all trying to stir the pot. So yes, a mutual appreciation for
You start to have
business ownership and
yeah.
running a family household really at a high level, engaged in kids' lives, and really caring about the relationships, of neighborhood and family and friends and distant, like there's a lot, and so for sure my bias and blind spots were I wouldn't say totally corrected, because there were a lot of days where I'm like, I'm just going to go for a bike ride and not do laundry.
We both
And our kids were grown, and
yeah.
so
We came to
the
an
engagement
agreement.
level is just different.
But I think you have a better understanding of the what it really takes, even if it's on a small scale. Because obviously,
Yeah.
I am not carrying the financial load of our family the way you have, but having a small inclination, suddenly I'm like, well, who's leaving the lights on? What are we doing? And you're saying things like, I have emptied this dishwasher 3 times. And
For sure.
it's a different space. And I think it has created an appreciation we couldn't have had otherwise. So
It is easy to be in love with you because I respect who and what you've done.
I've never had a podcast person say that. I feel like I need to say that.
That's true.
It's fun.
It's easy to love a person you can respect based on trying to proactively understand the weightiness of the roles and responsibility they carry. And we both know my love and adoration is tied to respect. It always, like, people that I respect, I can engage with and love and appreciate, and that's my blind spot of just not seeing and recognizing what it is that it took for you to do and achieve what, our family did. Can we shift gears just in finishing?
Sure.
What would you want people to know and remember about Us Therapy Group as your practice? Because you're a founder. You're in startup.
That's it.
You've been at this, running your own practice now for X number of months. What do you want people to know about what your personal focus and practice is, and then your broader practice about the providers you're trying to attract and what you all are building?
That's a great question. Well, I've had my own private practice for a few years, but it's always just been me. And I was within the Aspire Counseling Network, which provided just incredible scaffolding for how do you create a business on your own with, it's like training wheels. And it was incredibly helpful that way for me, of giving me the scaffolding and structure to create a practice so that when I was ready to do my own thing, I felt like I had a better idea on the business side of what I wanted to do. And then obviously being married to an entrepreneur who was lovingly going, you can do this, shove.
Got this.
And so you've been an amazing support that way, and obviously helped me figure out how to pull together the vision that I was having, which was really to just provide a space that brings together the competence of well-trained, skilled clinicians, but that marries the compassion and the empathy that it takes to sit with people who are trying to create that change in behavior or in relationships that they desire. And so this marrying of competence and compassion is, for me, the driving force of creating an environment for individuals and for couples and for families. I just did a family session the other day that was several children, parents, and all in the same
All in one room.
All in one room, and working through a really challenging period of time in their family lives. And it was inspiring, and it was heart-wrenching, and it was, one of the parents texted me after and said, I had no idea that could happen in an hour and a half, that we could go in feeling so scared about something and unable to talk about something, to hugging and feeling like there was touch from members of the family that hadn't been able to touch, and that there was some movement, and that helping a family or a couple not feel so fragile is really my ideal, that we are more resilient than we give ourselves credit. We can have hard conversations. We can change behaviors. We can do things that are hard for us, and that you have somebody in your corner. That's why I named it Us, because I think of it as not just an individual and a therapist, that's an us, but as a couple, you and I are an us, and our family is an us. Our family group thread is named Us, and that was even before Us, the company.
Yeah.
It's who we are, and there's familiarity to that, and there's comfort in us, and it's messy, and it's lovely, and it's hard. Life is challenging. And I will often say, from a Mormon culture space or an LDS culture space, I will say, I wish we could rename it. Instead of calling it the plan of happiness, I wish we would say the plan of humanness, because we are all human, having human experiences and successes and business ownership and breakups and failures and new homes and moving states and having children is part of being human. And having a human experience is truly the most fulfilling, the way you can look at just being human. If you can see the good, bad, and ugly of being human as the goal, instead of feeling like you're getting it wrong or getting it right, it can really settle so many things in your experience. So I would say bringing together those two things in an environment. If it's not with me, I hired professionals and clinicians that I would want to see. So there's a bias there, or somebody I could picture my child seeing, or my spouse seeing. Jake has his own company, so we'll let Jake and Melissa run their incredibly capable ship at Holbrook Behavioral. But we at us are clinicians that I would feel confident putting my own family in front of and creating a space for them to do their work. And that was the vision and the dream.
I'm excited for you, and I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for where we are. It's incredibly challenging. It's heavy. It's stressful. It's hard. But I'm grateful that we have had the experiences in our young lives and to be in a position to help other people. The most fulfilling part of what we're doing and building is, you mentioned it earlier, it is an honor to sit and to try to help people, and even though I love building businesses and being an entrepreneur, this feels different to me. It feels like a cause. It feels much more like a calling to do it because we have been through our own, and in that way, there's a mission and a purpose to it that is deeply fulfilling, and I'm grateful for that. We've been fortunate / blessed to be in the position we are, to be doing what we're doing. And so finish off anything that you want to freestyle or say of just thoughts or feelings of being in the position that you are, and where you want things to go. Where do you want the practice to go?
I listen. I don't listen to every podcast you do, so I feel like that needs to be in full disclosure. But I've listened to several, and one that stands out to me so recently is the one you did with Gardner Brown, and it just because I know how much you care about him as an individual person, but also that you respect him, and he uses the word fortunate so differently, and so I've adapted to that, and I really like that. I feel fortunate to be able to do, to be in the position to do what we do, and I feel fortunate that you and I married. I say to our young adult kids all the time, we didn't know that we would be as good of a match as we have become, because it's been by choice. We continually choose to do the work together, and that is really fulfilling. And I feel like at 21 or 22 when we married, I knew I loved you, but I didn't know what that would look like in 10 years from then. And it's continuous choices that have created the exponential, way bigger, way more fulfilling than I would have thought it would be, a marriage would be at that time. It used to really offend me when you would say to people, marriage is the hardest thing I've ever done. I'd be like, I have done a lot of my own work over here, and I'm kind of a dream to be married too. I am breezy. I'm pretty, Tom thinks a compliment is being reasonable, and I'm pretty reasonable. And I would give you a lot of crap for saying marriage is the hardest thing you've ever done. And I have come to really respect that phrase and to say it myself and say, it is the hardest thing we have ever done. And I am so grateful for it, because anything worth doing is hard. And anything that feels like it's, that you've worked at, I think most people would agree that when you've worked at something, you cherish it more, and it's the journey of, it's not really getting to somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's not just work clinically to help people see that, individuals see that the hard work, don't be scared of it. It's where there's fulfillment and joy, and the same for a good marriage.
I think that we've reframed what it means and feels like to be in a good marriage. Where I think when we were young, the perception was that it's peaceful and quiet and all loving all the time and benevolent. And I think what our reframe has become, which is why I say that it's the hardest thing I've ever done, because it's really easy to just sit quiet and to just ignore the other person who you're married to. That's an easy way out. The hard work is productively fighting and disagreeing and trying to move forward.
Engaging and
to engage in the battle of betterment is hard.
And so far you've said for fighting and the battle and
not a yelling battle as much as
just being different.
You're different people.
Being different.
I mean, I could go live single and it would be incredibly easy, but I would be lonely, and so the battle is worth engagement in to be connected and fulfilling when it's good. And you can't have good without the growth. Yeah. It just is not that way, so I love going to battle with you.
Well, as a lover of all of 80s music that we both are.
Love is a battlefield.
Right?
Who is it? Pat Benatar?
Yeah, it's Pat Benatar.
Nice.
So I always say, it's a battlefield,
Nice.
But are you an enemy or are you an ally?
I don't know. You do have shoulder pads on
I do.
your blazer right now, so it feels like the 80s is right.
It's right. But we're allies, right?
We are.
I'd say we're allies.
We are.
Most of the time.
Yep.
We should do one of these with our kids and see what they say.
They'll have their own therapist someday.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on Lift and Make Lighter.
I was just going to say, what do you think about something? So we'll just leave that.
Yeah, you can ask me. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think is the most helpful thing? What's been the turning point for you as far as mindset shift? For you to be comfortable going to, seeing a therapist, just being in that world, but not really going until just recently?
I think that a key thing for me as a guy, as a dude who is like, I'm okay not talking. And yet I think to go and visit with someone, the shift was, if I'm really going to be in this space, I want to have the lens from standing in those same shoes. Yeah. So admittedly, it was like, well, if I'm going to be in this business, I need to know, how does this process go? That felt a little, odd to me and a little hypocritical. So admittedly, I went with that lens. And within 20 minutes, I was like, wait, no, I need to be doing my own stuff. Like, what is the experience, and, what are the mindset shifts that I wanted to make? And so I think that that was really helpful for me. I think the bias or the blind spot was, what was it in me or my own perceptions that would limit my ability of wanting to really understand self? And a willingness to ask the questions of myself, do I believe it's worthwhile to sit with someone and to try to get professional feedback on those things that, are potentially stuck points? I've had 4 knee surgeries, a back surgery. I would never consider a serious injury as like Home Depot, where I'm just going to figure it out on my own, do it yourself, do my own rehab. Like, if you break an arm or a leg, like, you're going to the doctor. And yet things of the mind, a lot of stigma in our culture is, well, you just got to figure it out, toughen up. I was raised in a Marlboro Man, rub dirt on it type childhood. That's just how a lot of us were raised, to like suck it up. Well, what do we now have as a result of that? We have a lot of unfulfilled adults who didn't really process things. We have things people have head injuries I know I had multiple concussions as a kid in football. Well, if you were a little kid on a football team and you had if you had a concussion and you were willing to get right back into the huddle and get on the field, you were rewarded for that. And now today we know that's bad. It's not a good coping mechanism to just suck it up and get back out there. Well, I think a lot of men in particular, I know women too, but men have a harder time being willing to say, I got stuff in my mind that I really am stuck on, and it's holding me back. It may not be that you're broken per se, but if you're in a marriage that's an unfulfilling relationship, and if you're honest and you're not blaming your spouse all the time, you have stuff. Well, I know I did. And yet I didn't necessarily know how to address it. I didn't know how to really get over my pride to address it. But now on the other end of having gone and doing the work and being married to a therapist, I'm incredibly grateful for being willing to just overcome my own pride of like having real conversations with another adult, because my relationship with you is better. The children are, relationships are better. The way that I show up for work and employees is better. I'm better capable at dealing with the emotions and the relationships of life. So I feel like I'm more dynamic as a human, just because I can address the relationships with more tools in my life. So I think that that's been really valuable. I live better in my own skin now.
Yeah.
Because I just have the tools to think through, and how to address the relational parts of life better. I feel more dynamic that way. Thanks for asking.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, because you were very comfortable with me doing therapy when we were younger, and you were fine with that. And you've always been really comfortable and open with me going to school and doing what I wanted to with it. But until, I don't know, the last several years, it didn't feel like you felt like that was for you. And so I think even though being very comfortable around it, it didn't feel personal yet until something shifted.
I think that there was also some thoughts and feelings inside me that were nagging and had been for years. Things like, how do I approach my own faith? Mm-hmm. How do I approach how I feel about what is church versus what is gospel versus what is, my own internal commitment to God. That was a big one. How do I approach my own self-identity, like the driver, the driven one, the entrepreneur, all of those things? And what are the pressures and stresses that I carry as a result of my own identity in an unproductive way, that have come back to haunt me a number of times. So just addressing some of those other things and having questions about that and knowing what you've done and what you do as you visit, with me. I never hear any names. I don't hear about what goes on behind closed doors in therapy, but I hear you speak enough about the tools and the strategy and the outcomes of some of it that I internalize a lot. And what I've recognized over time as I look back on owning companies and building and, doing what I've done, I wish that I had those tools 20 years ago. That would have made me better in business, relationships. I would have just been better at what I've done. Now, I'm not saying that I failed, but would I have coped better through my 20s and 30s as an entrepreneur?
Maybe.
Yeah, And I learned, like, you scaffold it anyway, but I would have, some of the negative consequences of some of the stress coping would have not had the same trough.
Yeah. I just don't know that it was life interrupting enough until it is.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's just you're going to find the scaffolding you need at that time. And
Yeah,
then if it's
definitely.
when there's an interruption of, this is.
But if I could go back, when I now know about ADHD, what I know about the dyslexia, the way our own children are approaching schooling because of what we have learned, we have a child who is having a dramatically different experience than I had in school. And it's probable that if you took the two brains out of our heads and put them side by side, they would probably be almost the exact same. The DNA is very similar. And yet he is growing up not believing that he was stupid until he's 21 years old, and I did. Well, is that helpful? Yes. Confidence, the ability to show up and engage in entirely different, that's meaningful. That moves the needle, because we were not kicking the can down the road and saying, well, it worked out for me, so I don't need to do any of that work, right?
He'll figure it out.
Yeah, I figure, and
there's truth in that, and the yes and would be, and how about some resources to help you figure it out?
Yeah, in truth, there were a couple key intersection points in my teen years with friends. If I didn't have the same friends, with the same parents, with the same environmental things, the biopsychosocial, right? My bio and psycho was off as a child and teen. It was. I know it was. It's proven that it was. But my social came through and carried. Well, if you don't have the same social and your bio and psycho is off, that's a problem, And so, I think that for parents who kind of kick the can down the road, I do have strong opinions about that now. That, that is not an answer. That's called ignorance, right? That's just keeping yourself in the dark, saying, well, it worked out for me, it will for them. When children today are growing up in an entirely different environment. If I would have had the scroll, if I would have had the things that kids have access to now, knowing that I was literally a dopamine addict, but had no access to the same stuff, entirely different outcomes. So, I'm incredibly grateful that I learned. I wish that, some of the tools would have happened earlier on, but I'm grateful that we're now in a position in our small space of the planet where we can try to do things like this of awareness and saying, do the work. It's worth it. It takes swallowing your pride. It takes some money. It takes some time to commit to therapy or whatever that looks like, even if it's just read more books and listen to podcasts, but engage in the work instead of kicking the can down the road. It's a better life. It's a more fulfilling and happy life having done it.
Agreed.
I love you.
I love you.
Grateful for what you're doing.
Thank you.
The Lift and Make Lighter podcast is brought to you by LÉVO, a primary mental health care provider. At LÉVO, we specialize in comprehensive mental health assessments, diagnoses, and treatments for all ages. For more information, visit levomind.com. That's levomind.com.